Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Guys Who Stare at Stats. Cade Kennedy still here with Tyler Riggs as we make it to our second conference preview here. Football season, it's almost here, Tyler. I mean, we're almost to August as we record this. Looking at Georgia here, I mean, my goodness, two-time defending champions, possibility to do something that has just not been done since the 30s when Minnesota had a three-peat. And yet there are people telling me Georgia will go 7-5. I don't understand, Tyler. I don't understand. I mean, I get the whole joke of Kirby Smart said it, when they won the second national title. Some people didn't believe in us, but if you don't believe in Georgia now, if you don't look at this schedule now, I mean, granted, yes, Oklahoma was supposed to be there instead of Ball State, but I don't think that would have made much of a difference, honestly.
Yeah.
I hate to say that as an OU fan,
Sure.
but if you're Georgia, you look at this. You look at what is in front of you, the challenge, first time was just to win a national title. Second time was to go undefeated and win that national title with a perfect record. They're 2 for 2 on their goals here in this decade, so you got a good opportunity to go 3 for 3 now if you're the Bulldogs.
Well, and is what Georgia's done under Kirby Smart is they've become Bama, right? They are at that point where everybody knows they are the top dog, pun intended maybe a little bit there, and the fact that they're the ones to beat. And until proven otherwise, that's how it's going to be. And they've stacked up the recruiting classes to where, and you'll get to it here in a minute, we know they lost a lot of talent. I mean, that is evident. But at the same time, you have now stacked up enough recruiting classes that theoretically, similar to what Bama did there for a stretch, you should be able to just continue to produce those guys. So, this is – I wouldn't say all the pressure on Georgia this season, but, anytime you won 2 straight, the target's going to be there. So we'll see how that goes.
And I think even if all the pressure was on Georgia this season, even if you want to add all that pressure, I still think at the end of the day it doesn't really matter. You mentioned, Tyler, building Georgia to be basically the next Alabama. And I think they're still in that kind of early part of the Bama phase, if you want to think of the early 2010s Alabama, where you had A.J. McCarron, but he really didn't need to win you the game because of all the talent you had, Carson Beck expected to be the starting quarterback. They could put me out there. If I had Ladd McConkey and Brock Bowers to throw to, it could be a little, the worst 2-yard screen, flailer-looking thing, and it would still probably be a 15 to 20-yard gain. I'd look like an amazing athlete out there. That's just what Georgia's been able to build. I mean, it's just incredible to see what Kirby Smart has done. I was looking at it earlier today, obviously prepping for this a little bit. I decided to look at the SEC first team, second, third. Georgia has more starters on defense on the SEC first team than everybody else in the conference combined. 6 of the 11 best defenders in the SEC all play on Georgia. I mean, whether that be a Nazir Stackhouse on the defensive line, whether that be a Jamon Dumas-Johnson at linebacker, whether it be anyone you want to throw out there, they've got the talent to do it. They've got a great offensive line as well. They lost so much talent, but gained so much more. It's just incredible to see what they've done. Obviously, you look at the schedule. You have your big games. Of course, South Carolina to get everything started. That's just a classic game at this point. That South Carolina early in the year, CBS, you always love to see that. You get your Auburn rivalry. Florida, of course. At Tennessee is going to be the big game. Everyone's looking at that one as, you go to Neyland. You're going to see how that one's going to play out. But other than that, I mean, Georgia Tech, that's an afterthought. Yes, that's a rivalry game, but with where Georgia Tech's been, that's just another beatdown waiting to happen, unfortunately, for Georgia Tech. But, I mean, I think the real question is not, can anyone stop Georgia, at least in my opinion, in the regular season until we get to that Tennessee game. Can anyone keep it within, 2 possessions of Georgia? Can anyone keep it in that 14 range with them?
Yeah. Now, first of all, I got to backtrack a little bit because let's give some respect to that road game against Vanderbilt. Hey, they did receive 4 first-place votes.
We'll get to Vanderbilt, Tyler.
We'll
get to that.
I'm kidding. That's pushover. But it's just, I mean, the schedule lines up for them. This is kind of their last year of enjoying being in the weaker side of the SEC, so to speak, as they've been the last, 10, 15 years. They really, the big game you got to get it for, you mentioned, is Tennessee. I mean, that's going to be the one. But other than that, they should just pretty much handle business everywhere else. I mean, Ole Miss might be a fun one. We'll see what Florida has, but ultimately just the talent on paper with this Georgia team is just going to be too overwhelming for a lot of people.
I mean, it really is. I mean, Georgia's one of those that I don't know how to say it. I could say so many things, but it's just better put bluntly. They're just better than everybody else. Yeah. They're just out, with the exception of maybe Alabama when they go head-to-head at times, but they can just out-talent you. I think the best example we saw of that entire game was Missouri last year. Georgia didn't look like they wanted to be there. Georgia was asleep for 3.5 quarters, but they had enough talent to simply just, when they decided they wanted to wake up in that game, it was over.
Yeah.
The second Georgia woke up, you went, oh, well, it was a good run, boys, but, Mizzou couldn't pull it off.
Yeah.
They're up double digits. Mizzou plays everything nearly perfectly. You're bombing 55-yard field goals. It doesn't matter. Georgia will just find a way to out-talent you at this point. And until someone can build, a bigger Death Star to stop the Death Star, this is where we are. And, I mean, you joked about it a little bit in our Big 12 preview with, just because we have all this parity doesn't mean we still can't get the result we all expect.
Right.
We saw that last year, 65-7, the ultimate demolition derby, so to speak. It was bad. And, I mean, I don't think it'll be 58-point beatdown bad in a natty this year, but we will have to see what Georgia does because, I mean, my prediction, if they don't go 12-0 in the regular season and going back to Atlanta, something's gone wrong.
Oh, absolutely. And really the only thing that's going to stop themselves is themselves. I mean, that's it. It would be guys not taking things seriously enough, that new crop of guys that steps up, not realizing that, hey, just because we're at this point doesn't mean we can stop putting in the work, right? I wouldn't say that's what's gotten Alabama done in, but it's just the fact that, as long as you continue to do things the way you've been in terms of taking it, I mean, Kirby Smart deserves all their credit because he had these guys talking about last year that people were doubting them that they were going to go 7-5 last year when they had all that talent sitting there. So, as long as they keep that underdog mentality, no matter how much they're just blowing people out, and they keep the, hey, we're going to take every single opponent, doesn't matter if it's Tennessee Martin or if it's Tennessee, we're going to treat them the same type of threat. As long as you keep that mentality and you're able to keep guys away from the off-the-field issues, we've seen a little bit of that, unfortunately, start to bubble up a little bit. They got another guy, I can't remember who it was this week, caught for speeding. As long as you keep those guys in check off the field, on the field, you're just going to continue to roll.
And it will be a lot of rolling. I do want to go on a little bit of a side tangent here before we move on to the next team. This is more of an SEC thing as a whole. Went to Atlanta on vacation this year.
Sure.
I had mentioned that in some of the episodes that if you're wondering why there's a random month-long gap in our channel, having 3 vacations that neither Andrew nor I knew were stacked on top of each other, that played out there. Went to Atlanta, went to an Atlanta United game, had an absolute blast. Mercedes-Benz Stadium, folks. If you've never been to that stadium, it is one of the nicest places I've had the privilege of sitting in. I mean, it really is. It is a state-of-the-art, absolutely wonderful, whether it be a Falcons game, Atlanta United, the SEC championship. It was an OU fan, looking at that going, if I ever get to see OU play a game in there, that would be great. That would be just, one of the best experiences you can have. I also want to mention, we both cover high school athletics, obviously. Sure. They have a little memorial, and by little I mean massive, because everything in this stadium is massive, of every single helmet of every single high school team in the state of Georgia, and they rotate the state champion winners and have like a little history of it and everything. Just the dedication to all Atlanta sports, the city itself, everything is just perfectly done. I mean, it is absolutely impressive. But that's enough about me talking about a stadium. We're here to talk about SEC teams here. Alabama, another team that goes to Atlanta frequently. They're pretty good, 11-2, a down year for them, Not many programs get to say that, Tyler.
Yeah.
Nick Saban has built that culture back to where it used to be in the Bear Bryant days of you don't win 11 games and not get rewarded for it, and they only got a Sugar Bowl, which they used to be the big deal. Now it's not. It's kind of this natty or bust culture that has really taken over, but that's what you expect to do when you're an elite program.
It's a great spot to be when you're disappointed when you're not winning a national championship.
It absolutely is. But the only problem that I see with Alabama this year is the inverse of last year. Last year we talked about it. We have Bryce Young. If you're an Alabama fan, you're thinking, okay, who is he going to throw the ball to?
Right.
You eventually develop your playmakers over the year. Now we have the opposite. We know who our playmakers are. We know, a Jace McClellan, a Ja'Cory Brooks, someone like that, a Jermaine Burton. Who's your quarterback if you're Alabama?
Yeah.
The big debate here, Tyler Buckner, the Notre Dame transfer, you brought in Tommy Rees as an offensive coordinator, or you have Jalen Milroe, who we saw him against Arkansas. He looked good for a few moments. He looked really bad for a few moments. This is going to be a weird year for Alabama because it's almost that back to basics. You can rely on the run game. You have a great defense still. But if you don't have a quarterback that can make those decisions and those big-time plays, we could be looking at a repeat of 11-2 again, which still isn't bad, but that's not where Alabama is or where they need to be.
No, and it harkens back to the early part of their dynasty, right, where when they started really catching fire, it wasn't like you mentioned this in the Big 12 video. It's not so much then it wasn't about the quarterback, right? Like a guy like A.J. McCarron, to a point at that time, was their best quarterback, but he was just a solid guy. He wasn't a guy that you would depend on to carry the game. A guy that I thought, was an NFL talent, but maybe not a top-tier one, and that was the best quarterback to date. Then they go through the string where you have, Tua Tagovailoa. You had, before that, Jalen Hurts. Then you had Bryce Young, and those were three uber-talented quarterbacks, two of which in Hurts and Tagovailoa we've already seen reach some good NFL heights. It could be better. I mean, it could still progress, and I'm sure Bryce Young's going to be something. I mean, he might be the most talented of the three, and that's crazy to say. And not only that, but oh goodness, I'm blanking now. Mac Jones.
Yeah, so you can't forget Mac Jones as well.
That's good too as well. So you had those guys, that four-string quarterbacks were just impressive. And so now Alabama's in a spot where it's not like the old days where they just depend on great defense and a run game because they don't play that style anymore. You got to have a quarterback in this modern-day college football world. So, yeah, that's the biggest thing that hinges. People are going to say, well, they lost a lot of talent on defense. They'll be fine. We know Bama just produces stars on stars on stars defensively. I'm not worried about that. But like you said, for me, it's weird to say that a season might hinge on the quarterback for Alabama. That's something we haven't had to say, in a long time, especially under Nick Saban.
Exactly. It's one of those that I look at the schedule and I see, a lot of games that could come down to that. Texas, I mentioned in the Big 12 video, you're going to hear me say it, until I'm blue in the face. Texas lives for those type of games. Alabama saw this firsthand last year. Texas, everyone kind of joked, well, this is going to be another beatdown, but, good to see these two playing. Texas made it a game. Some of that was Alabama, I think, playing down. Some of that is Texas plays up. If you don't think Texas is going to come in there and play up to Alabama, you're kidding yourself. That's who Texas is. I have seen that firsthand too many times. I do also want to give Alabama credit. We don't see this often enough, and I love when this happens. Just going to USF. Not USF coming to Alabama, taking the time to go down there, give some little group of 5 team. That's a big game for them. It's still going to be a beatdown. It's still going to be ugly. But it's just nice to see that kind of little, giving, the little 2-for-1, seeing that actual one game there. I like seeing those little games like that. You get Ole Miss at home. That, of course, will be fun. Mississippi State, your rivalry there. Texas A&M, which, not going to say that's a trap game, but that's a little, keep an eye on that. Those games have been competitive the past few years.
Absolutely.
Arkansas is still... We know where they can be. It's just, will they be there? I have no earthly idea. They're another ultimate wild card type of team. Tennessee, though, third Saturday in October. Fun. That's all I can say to describe that game. That is going to be a blast. And then bye week, LSU at home. You want your revenge, there it is. You've got every opportunity to win those games. But if you can't make the big plays, you're not going to be able to win those 2 games. You might trip up somewhere else. You go to Kentucky, you get Chattanooga, who obviously they need to be worried about. You can't underestimate the Mocs.
Can't overlook Chattanooga.
And then the Auburn game, which I'll talk about a little bit more when we get to Auburn, that I have no earthly idea what to expect from Auburn.
Yeah.
I don't think anyone does. But I do want to give you a warning. 10th anniversary of the Kick Six.
Oh, 10 years already?
It's been 10 years.
Oh, my gosh.
Almost to the day.
I'm getting old.
10-year anniversary of the
Oh.
Kick Six. You know Auburn's going to have, Jordan Hare has some voodoo to it, it feels like at times, where they get some things that shouldn't happen on a football field. If you don't think that game will be a little wonky for Bama, it will be. I'm sure Bama fans know that. I'm sure you have to mentally prepare yourself for that. It's the Iron Bowl. Anything can happen in that thing. But I still think Alabama, they're a solid at minimum 10-win team, but the opportunity's there to be 12. It's just, can somebody make the right plays at the right time, especially at quarterback?
That 4-game stretch for me, Cade, where they're at Texas A&M, they got Arkansas, Tennessee, and LSU. That's really where their seasons make or break. And 3 of those games are at home, so that's a big help, but that will really show kind of where this new crop of Bama talent is. I'm not saying they'll go 0-4 through that stretch, but I think in all 4 of those games they'll face some adversity. I don't think it's going to be a cakewalk by any stretch. So, how they handle that or don't, that's where that season's going to come down to. Those 4 games right there in the middle of the schedule, I think will obviously decide the ceiling of this Alabama team.
Absolutely. If you want the stretch, you got to get through October and then LSU. I mean, that is almost always how it has been, unless Auburn comes out of nowhere, but we'll get to them in a bit. But switching gears now, going to LSU, and you want to talk about starting a season off strong. You get Florida State in Orlando.
Oh man.
You get an absolute You get an absolute battle, but hey, LSU's got talent too. I mean, Jaden Daniels, he's still there. He's still a fun quarterback to watch. Malik Neighbors, he's the next big, wide receiver to come out of LSU. Tell me if you haven't heard that before. A insane NFL talent wide receiver playing at LSU. They seem to always have one of those in the back pocket there in Baton Rouge. And then I want to talk about the defense here because, I mean, Georgia took the story. They were the main story with all theirs. But when you've got someone like Harold Perkins, you've got someone like, Wingo or Mason Smith or Major Burns, which, by the way, Major Burns, that's a name of the year candidate right there.
Yeah.
They've got a great defense, too. LSU has playmakers as well. It would not surprise me, Tyler. And this is coming for someone who had no faith in Brian Kelly last year to turn this thing around.
You should have known better, right? Because despite all of the reports that he may not be a great guy, maybe a little bit on the douchey side.
Yeah.
Man, for whatever reason, could coach football.
Yeah,
I mean, he doesn't.
This is one of those, I thought Brian Kelly would struggle year one, and this would be the year.
Well, and early it looked like that, right?
Yeah.
Like we thought last year, oh, yeah, here it comes. It's off the rails. Kelly's finally getting his moment of, hey, you're in the SEC, bud.
Yeah.
And, boy, he turned it around. I mean, they found a way. By the end of the year we talk about momentum trending. LSU's got it going again. I mean, they do. So it's definitely a team that, schedule-wise, there's definitely some tough spots in there, but at the end of the day, they might have the talent to be able to match with it.
I mean, here's what I'm going to say, Tyler. I'm going to shoot my shot now. If they beat Florida State, which I think,
and that's not a game that I mean, folks, that's a tough game. Florida State, I think, might be legit this year. They've got the big factor in the QB. I mean, if they, like I said, if they get past that one, watch out.
Yeah, if they get past that one, there's only one team that can stop LSU at that point, and it's Alabama.
It's the Army of Black Knights. Oh, you're right. It's Alabama.
It's actually off. I don't know who off is. Yeah, it's but no, but in all seriousness, if LSU can get past Florida State, I think I would not put them as favorites to beat Bama purely for being in Tuscaloosa, but I would say it's a darn near 50-50 game.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I mean, in my opinion, it's already near a 50-50 game. It's one of those we'll have to see, but if I'm an LSU fan, this is a great time right now. I mean, you've had a lot of great times. You had 2019. That was only 4 years ago, but then you had the Ed Ogeron weird dip, and now you're right back up.
They just kind of go in cycles, right? It's a roller coaster for LSU, it seems like. Yeah. You have this crazy high point where you look like, all right, we're the SEC here. We are the water bearer for a bit, and then they just kind of go with those weird dips. But the good news is Brian Kelly says accent got better this offseason. So
Well, I would focus more on making sure your run game is as strong as it can be than fixing the. It doesn't matter what accent you have. If you win a national championship, you can talk however you want. I'm sure they won't care.
That's true.
But LSU, they'll be good again. I'm expecting the Tigers to do what they do best. Aside from, the 2 years after 2019, that was just, I don't understand that with LSU. I really don't. But that's enough about contemplating why LSU has cycles. It's time to talk about Tennessee. Tennessee, the story of last year, 11-2, beat Alabama. Josh Heupel has completely just changed the game for the Vols. I mean, he really has. Everything that we knew about Tennessee, that you had seen, all this history, all this tradition, what Tennessee can be. We finally saw that last year. It wasn't your traditional Tennessee. It was just pure high-flying football, and it was impressive. I mean, it was fun. It was flashy. It was Hyatt scoring 5 touchdowns in a game. It was everything you wanted to see, and now it's entered Joe Milton. And Joe Milton is not the worst quarterback in the world by any stretch of the imagination. The only problem for Joe Milton is he has to be the guy behind Hendon Hooker.
Right.
That's the only problem. They still got great receivers like Brew McCoy. Tennessee's still going to have a great offense. The only problem is, can they tighten that defense just a bit more? It wasn't a horrible defense.
It was improved, right?
By any means. It's just, can they fix that secondary a little bit? When you get to a little bit of, injuries and things, can that depth hold up there? And you look at Tennessee's schedule, you look at some of the early games, you get that neutral site in Nashville against Virginia. You go to the Swamp against Florida. You get UTSA, which, hey, that'll be a fun game.
It's a good early challenge.
That's a good early challenge. And then South Carolina, there's your big revenge game you want there. Bye week, Texas A&M, at Bama, at Kentucky. The big one, of course, we talked about already, November 18th. If Tennessee is as good as I think they will be, that's a one-loss Tennessee at most playing Georgia at home for the SEC East. That's going to be a crazy game.
That could be interesting. I think, we talk about some of the depth things you mentioned there. That was kind of the issue, I think, for Tennessee at the end of the year last year. Injury, run out of gas a little bit towards the end of the season after the big upset win, so to speak, that thriller. That beautiful scene where Josh Heupel's just in the middle of the field, and, man, it's nothing but orange and white. I mean, I got to admit, that was a cool scene right there. I mean, that made you – I'm sure all the Tennessee fans felt like it was, 1998 again. Rocky Top on top. But it's just one of those deals of, can they turn the corner now, right? I think Heupel's got them in the right direction. They've got some talent stacked up a little bit. And it's, can you now get over the hump, like you said, and essentially, can you compete with Bama, Georgia every year? Can you do that and put yourself in a spot to where, the SEC at the top is the tightest of margins, Cade. We've seen that. I mean, if you're not Georgia and Bama, if you're trying to be at the top, you got to be playing your A++ ball. So, and I think for Tennessee, it's really going to, pivot there on Mr. Milton and the rest of that offense. Can they be as dynamic as it was last year with Mr. Hooker at the helm?
I mean, this Tennessee team, and I mean, you hit it perfectly on the head there, Tyler. I mean, it's just, we've got to see the improvement, and it's not, some massive thing that has to be changed.
Margins, man. Slim
it's
margins.
Just margins, because that's where the SEC is. I mean, the thing that Tennessee in just, 2 years went from, Jeremy Pruitt and the McDonald's bags of cash. And
by the way, he got hired this week as a PE teacher. That was an ESPN top story.
That was, I mean, just my goodness there. But to go from that to talks of being a legitimate contender, not only for the SEC, but if you could get past Alabama or Georgia, which are 2 big ifs, by the way. No, those are way easier said than done. But you put yourself in national championship contention. That's where Tennessee is now. It's just impressive to see where they've come from. I mean, it's just absolutely a fun story for sure. But we got one more fun story to talk about. And, folks, the Vanderbilt Commodores. We have to talk about them. Now, you're probably wondering, if you're watching this all in order here. Now, Cade, why are we talking about Vandy as the 5th team in the SEC? That seems really weird. Well, there's a reason why I've done this to prove a point, Tyler. Because this entire list of teams we're going through is based on how the media voted. And Vanderbilt got 5 first-place votes, not just for the division. They got 8 first-place votes in the SEC East. How that happened, I have no idea. They got 5 first-place overall SEC champion votes, which makes even less sense. Vandy still in points, finished dead last in the East, but finished 5th overall in the SEC. I'd make it make sense. I don't think you can, but
I think it's just the fact that, kind of like we saw with Kansas last year, right? So this Vanderbilt program had been just so lifeless on the football side of things for the last, seemingly decade, that all of a sudden, they win some games, that they surprise some people. You miss out on a bowl game just barely. Now there's a little bit more of, hey, is Vandy coming? Once upon a time, this Vanderbilt team was not the laughingstock of the SEC on the football side of things. So it's kind of similar to Kansas, right, where maybe people are just drinking the Kool-Aid a little bit and hoping that, hey, we could get things really going on the right track. So it doesn't make sense, but I think that's what it is. People just kind of memeing a bit and saying, hey, you know what? Let's recognize the improvement Vandy's accomplished here so far.
And, I mean, looking at Vandy's schedule here, you look at the first 4 games. You get Hawaii at home. You get Alabama A&M at home. You go to Wake Forest, and you go to UNLV. Vanderbilt could theoretically start 4-0 playing Kentucky, a team they beat last year.
Yeah.
And then Missouri, a team they battled with last year.
No.
And then at Florida, who they also beat.
You're talking
I'm not saying
Vanderbilt.
I'm not saying 7-0 Vandy
Georgia?
plays Georgia.
Oh, no.
I'm not saying that happens.
Could you imagine?
I'm just saying the possibility is not 0. It's like maybe 1%.
And that one's at home.
At best.
Are we getting game day Vanderbilt against Georgia?
That could happen.
Oh, man.
I'm just saying, Clark Lee, third year here, 5-7 last year.
Yeah.
It's one of those, it's like Kansas. You mentioned it was like Kansas, and I do agree. It's one of those traditionally down football, kind of became a joke program, basically. Right. Unless we're talking baseball. That's a whole different story.
I'm just talking specifically on the football field. Yeah.
I know, Football here, though, I really, the 4-0 part I do believe. I believe that can happen for Vandy. 7-0 would be hilarious. I don't think we'll get there. Maybe they steal Missouri, and maybe they're
I think they could realistically beat Missouri.
5-2. Yeah. I think Vandy can make a bowl game. I think you look at it, there's 2 games they can snatch in there in the conference play. Yeah. Maybe it's Kentucky and Missouri at home. Maybe it's they beat Florida. Maybe Auburn is fluky and up and down, and they snatch a win there for homecoming. Anything could happen there with Vandy, and I really do think if they can just fix the offense a bit, which, once again, when you lose your quarterback and everything and you've got to reshift the offense and that is a lot more difficult than for me to just say fix the offense. I understand that.
Well, and so to that, you got to remember last year one of the big highlights of why I think people are excited that young man A.J. Swan, that quarterback, freshman, stepped in, had some really – positive influence on that offense, and they lost a couple guys, but if he continues to develop, I mean, we're going to talk about till we're blue in the face that you got to have a quarterback to compete, and that's whether it's college or pros. So if you got a guy that is running things at the helm of the offense, that stabilizes a lot of other things. So maybe if he could continue to improve, that bodes well, because that kind of stabilizes some of those other weapons and raises those. The big key for Vandy though. At defense. I mean, they're still nowhere near an SEC defense, I think, is the problem. Last year, they were just leaking points. They're able to score a bit, but just leaking points. So that's, for them, that's the big circle that Clark Lee's got of, hey, can we improve this area? Because we know, man, if you're going to be a top-tier team in the SEC, you got to be producing on that defense side of the ball.
Yeah, and that's why I do think, that's why I say the 7-0 is not 0.
Right.
Because you look at, the Vandy defense is not great, but you look at those 3 SEC teams, especially this year, Kentucky, Will Levis is gone. you're back to the drawing board on your offense. Missouri is Missouri. You know, the second worst team in the SEC East. Their offense is a bit hit or miss. That could be a defensive game. Who knows there? Yeah. Graham Mertz is Florida's quarterback. We'll get to my opinions on Florida when we get to Florida. Man. But Billy Napier needs to figure something out. His recruiting's doing well. I'm not blaming him on that one. That thing is going up. But you need results. Yeah. You cannot just have
Florida,
good recruiting.
You got to have results. Yeah.
We'll get to Florida when we get to Florida. But that's why all I'm going to leave you with is, you know, maybe another 5-7 season, maybe a 6-win season, maybe 7 if you go really well. 8's not happening. You know, unfortunately, I don't think it is. But the future looks bright for Vandy, and that's something
brighter.
Brighter. It's still good to see.
Folks, you love to see. If Vandy is 7-0 going into Georgia, this man Cade will be back on this channel with the biggest "I told you so" ever, and it will be hilarious.
I will not actually be on the channel. I will be in Nashville for it. I will live stream myself at the game. That's OU's bye week. I'm just saying. You know, it lined up, Tyler.
Highlighted on recent events that happened, you know, with me that I've told you about. Yeah. Maybe there's some funding there if that happens.
Maybe. Yeah, that could be one heck of a trip right there. Vandy's got to go 7-0 for us to do vacation in Nashville. But either way, moving on to Arkansas before we try to meme something into existence. Arkansas playing Western Carolina to start the year. Arkansas is a team that they're another one that I was high on last year.
Yeah.
I was really on the KJ Jefferson train. I thought he was the guy. And I still am to somewhat. I'm not jumping off that train. I am going to jump on the rocket, though. Raheem Sanders, he's a fun running back to watch. Sam Pittman, I mean, showing that if you can control an offensive line, you can control a football team. He is building that culture back up at Arkansas, back to where we've seen it be in the early 2010s when Arkansas was arguably the third best team in the country, fourth best team in 2011. They had that big year there. Arkansas, the only problem for them, their defense was horrible.
Yeah.
Their defense was horrible, and some of their better players left. So they're in a bit of a pit there when it comes to that. But if you're Arkansas, you have the offense to compete with some of these teams. It wouldn't shock me if they went toe-to-toe for 3 quarters with LSU. It wouldn't shock me if they played Ole Miss tight or Alabama tight or something like that. But they don't have the horses on defense to win those games, unfortunately for them. But I still think they could get off to a good start. I mean, 3-0 with Western Carolina, Kent State, and BYU isn't the most troubling schedule in the world. I still think Arkansas could, get an 8-9 win season there. It's just they don't have the guys, at least in my opinion, to compete at that top level like we talked about with Tennessee. Yeah. It's margins there. You can get closer, but you're still not close enough.
Right, exactly. And that's just kind of their spot they're at. And not only that, they're in the West, so that's a lot tougher division. And it's just, it's the SEC. You don't really get, any true off week in conference play per se. Maybe Missouri at this point, but that's beside the fact. It's just one of those deals. I mean, look, having KJ Jefferson and you mentioned the Rocket there, both of them back, that's big. Their line's going through a bit of a reshuffle offensively. Their receivers now, Jalen Burks, that's kind of big, and defensively, like I said, Pittman hit the portal really hard in the offseason for that defensive side of the ball. So we'll see how fast that comes together. It's just, is it going to be enough? LSU's on the road. That's a horribly tough game. You got Bama on the road. You can probably compete with, the back half of that schedule looks favorable. So there's a chance you can wind up 10-2. I think still with Arkansas here, but you also could see in the same respect, or maybe you slip against Ole Miss right before Alabama. Maybe Texas A&M gets you right after you fall to LSU. So there's a wide range of possibilities for Arkansas. Cade, honestly, depending on how things are, shaping up after that LSU game, right? LSU's the first real challenge. That stretch there through Bama is really kind of where we'll see where this Arkansas team. I can see anything from 7-5 to 10-2. I really can. It's just that type of team.
Yeah, and that's what I was kind of thinking. Yeah. I would add Mississippi State to that stretch as well, just because of that fallback game after Bama there, where you're coming back home. You're hoping you can turn that thing around. Yeah, it can wear on you a little bit, but Man, Arkansas and Texas A&M, just to harp on that, how many times have we seen Arkansas have A&M pinned dead to right in Jerry's world and see A&M sneak away?
Oh, yeah.
And, I mean, you put it in one of the worst possible spots this year, right after LSU, right before Ole Miss and Bama. Arkansas's got to find a way to win that game, man. I mean, it is – I'm not an Arkansas fan, and it infuriates me every time I watch it. Just seeing them have them pinned, and they can't just – they can't finish it. You just watch and you go, A&M can't keep getting away with it, and they just keep finding ways. It's one of those that the Southwest Classic is finally moving to home and home, which is good to see. I do like that.
Yeah.
You got to find a way to win one time at Jerry World. Jerry Jones is not going to be happy if you spend all that money moving that game there to see his alma mater lose. But that moves us on to Auburn. And Auburn, Hugh Freeze, year one. Auburn went 5-7 last year. Auburn has the same kind of problem to me that Alabama has, that you have some weapons, both on offense, more so on offense than defense, but you have one big problem. Who is your quarterback? Peyton Thorne transferred in from Michigan State. You still have Robbie Ashford. But I don't think either of those guys, those are not SEC-dominant caliber quarterbacks. Those are maybe get you to a bowl game caliber quarterbacks. But that's about it. And I get that this is year one for Hugh Freeze, and maybe the offense will go a little bit, better than expected, knowing Hugh Freeze's record with offenses. But, man, just looking at those two quarterbacks, I looked at that and, this is very whelming, I guess is the best way to put it.
I'm sorry, I love how you described that. Not overwhelming, not underwhelming.
Just I am fully whelmed.
No, I think this is the year, year one for Hugh Freeze. It's just going to be about, like we talked about with some of those Big 12 teams, who are guys that are going to help you for year 2, 3, and 4, right? Who's going to be positive factors there? You're going to have to clean out some stank, some overhang, if you will, from the previous regime of guys that just probably have either given up or maybe they're just not competitive enough, whatever, right? Because you don't get to this point without that, with some of those degraders of culture, I like to call them. So he was going to have to kind of reinstall the culture. And then after that, we know wherever he goes, he can develop quarterbacks. I mean, we saw Malik Willis be able to turn into a pro prospect because of it, and they had Liberty rolling there. It's just, can Hugh balance the theatrics versus actually building a winning football program? We've seen him do it. We've also seen the bad side of it, too. So a lot hinges on what he can do in terms of establishing things. It's probably not going to be pretty this year. Again, you're in the West. You're probably the punching bag of the West. So I don't know if bowl eligibility is in with reach per se. It might be. I mean, it could be. Your non-con's not that bad. It's just, I don't know if they have any tried and true wins in conference. Maybe Vanderbilt, but you're at Vanderbilt, and we know they got 4 first-place votes. So maybe not. Yeah.
I mean, it's one of those, if I do take a crack at their conference wins, Vandy would probably be the first guess.
Yeah.
Mississippi State maybe being a home game there, but that's right after Ole Miss and LSU.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe Texas A&M if you can, you're riding a 3-0 hype, I don't trust Jimbo Fisher at all. We'll get to A&M when we get to A&M. A&M is one of those teams that, they're like Texas to me. You could show me all the talent in the world. I don't believe it till I see it.
Fair enough.
But I do want to mention Auburn. They do have one weird game on the schedule. That's that game at Cal.
Yeah.
Auburn fans, having a 10:30 Eastern kickoff, I'm sure is not something they're used to. So I'm just going to warn Auburn fans right now, if there are any that listen. Be prepared for the wildest ride of your life. Welcome to Pac-12 After Dark. You've probably seen it from afar. You will hate experiencing it in person.
True.
It comes for everybody.
Yeah.
Even though it's at Berkeley, you have truly never seen pure football in front of 10 people at Berkeley at 9:30 Central Time, 10:30 Eastern, but a cool, nice 7:30 over there. And then you realize it's 2 in the morning and you're in double overtime with a team you should be beating by 20.
Yeah.
And then you're just like, I stayed up for this. What am I doing with my life? You're being a fan. That's what you're doing. And, I mean, I'm sorry. It probably won't be a dub. Auburn should take care of Cal pretty easily. I'm not high on Cal at all. But I don't know. If Auburn struggles against Cal by any means, then we're off to a way rougher start than I would think, but we'll have to see. I would say Auburn's anywhere from 5 to 7 this year. 5 wins, maybe 7, maybe 8 if they get really lucky and pull some Auburn stuff that we know they can do. They might find a way to sneak a home win in there, maybe an Arkansas road win if you catch Arkansas at a bad time. But other than that, I cannot see Auburn being anywhere higher than an 8-win team at the maximum. And that would take a lot of luck going their way, too.
I think it's one of those teams that you throw in the bucket of if they're even bowl eligible, that's probably a huge success for year one for Coach Freeze.
And that moves us on to Texas A&M. Texas A&M has gone 5-7 again after the 2022 season. Everyone with eyeballs could determine that you need to fix the offense. That's an easy position, I think, to take for everybody here. You still have an Aya Smith. You still have talent there on that offensive side. You have a lot of good defensive players. That's always been the case at Texas A&M under Jimbo Fisher. It's his 6th year now with the Aggies. However, the main question, Tyler, can the offense improve? You hired Bobby Petrino specifically to be the offensive coordinator and fix this mess that A&M has been in where, you can hold somebody to 21, but it doesn't matter when you're only scoring, 14. That's the main problem where A&M has been. But Connor Wegman, Max Johnson, those are kind of some of your quarterbacks. We'll see if they have to go through quarterback by committee again. We'll see if they can just keep one starter and roll with it. But Texas A&M, let me tell you, I don't know what to make of them. I really don't.
Okay, I drank the Kool-Aid a bit with Texas at Cade. I might be drinking a little bit with A&M, only because I think the move by Fisher to realize, hey, you know what? It's time for me to bring somebody else in to call the plays. I think that's a big kind of come to Jesus moment that Fisher had with himself. And that's important because, we know with a coach getting paid that much money, basically having a, hey, you can't fire me even if you wanted to type of buyout with, $95 million or something ridiculous. For him to kind of take it on himself, say, hey, I need to change my ways a bit. I think that's a big step. And they've got some of those offensive pieces. They might, for the first time since Johnny Manziel, have a guy at quarterback that they can trust. That's big. What did we say last year? We ain't going to trust them until they have a quarterback figured out. They didn't have it last year. But towards, through some of that chaos and some of that downturn, you kind of saw something emerging there. Their big problem is they got to be physical. Them and Auburn were horrible against the run last year. A&M was the worst in the conference against the run. You've got to bring some physicality. I mean, you can't keep recruiting these high 5-star defensive guys and just be that soft defensively. I mean, we saw Jimbo at Florida State. They had a nasty defense when they were rolling. But we also saw at times where the hype got to them and they were a bit soft. So they got to do something there. That's the big key. Can they actually bring it defensively? It's weird to say that, because that's at least an early part of Jimbo's tenure there at A&M been a success is the defense. It's just, like you said, the offense has been a miss. So it's kind of flipped this year. They got to show some physicality. Got to show some fight. Got to show some want.
You're high on Texas A&M.
I'm not high. I'm just
you're higher than 5-7.
I am. I think if things go right early, you look at the schedule, there's a chance they could be undefeated rolling into the Alabama game.
That's true.
That's possible. And then with Bama kind of in a phase where they've got to find themselves early in the season as well, maybe you could pull something off there in College Station. That's all I'm saying. And if you do that, then I think that swings some big confidence in them. The problem is that they got to play Bama and Tennessee back-to-back, obviously. It's a big hurdle right there.
Yeah. Let's see, I look at this. I'm looking at it from the exact opposite perspective. Yeah. I'm looking at it as, I see.
You're telling me they're losing to Mexico.
No. Miami on the road.
Oh, I'm not buying the
Miami on the road early in the season when Miami has no idea what they're doing and Texas A&M still trying to figure this thing out. I'm not saying they lose.
Miami's trying to figure it out. What are we talking about?
That's what I'm saying. You have two scrambling teams trying to, you got two headless chickens running around trying to fight each other, and, eventually one of them might pass out from exhaustion.
As newly minted pro SEC guys that we are, give me the SEC.
Okay, so either way, I think they beat Miami. I'm not saying, I'm just saying that might be a close call accidentally or something like that. Auburn, I've already made my piece on that. If Auburn, Auburn's one of those ultimate wild cards. You could show me all the talent or none of the talent in the world, and I could still throw them 50-50 in certain games. That's one of them where Auburn and A&M have that weird, they can't beat them at home, but they can beat them on the road type of deal. If that pattern continues, maybe that's a loss. Arkansas, I've talked about. Can they get that monkey off their back? That's 2 potential. Bama's 3, Tennessee's 4. South Carolina beat them last year. That's 5. Ole Miss is 6. I think you beat Mississippi State. LSU 7. That's 5-7 again. I'm not saying they're going 5-7 again by any means. I think they're maybe a 7-8 win team, but I don't see anything other than the traditional Aggie 8-4 in the cards again.
I gotta disagree. I think again you could be undefeated rolling into the Alabama game and maybe pull some off. You lose to Tennessee, you lose to LSU, you're 10-2.
And I could see some of that, but I think at the end of the day, they're just going to carry a little too much. You mentioned not being physical. I think that can still be a problem. A&M is like Texas. We talked about it. I have to see them do it first before I believe in them in any ability whatsoever.
And that's fair, but you're also missing one of the big things. The scheduling gods have aligned to where they get the rare 8 home games this year.
That's true.
They only got to go on the road 4 times.
That's true.
I mean, that's it. And 2 of those are huge games in Tennessee and LSU. And I don't know about Miami, but, that's the Ole Miss game could be kind of a wild card. But, I mean, you get to play at home that much. That's nice. That helps a lot, man, when you're not – constantly bouncing around on the road. They don't have consecutive road games in the schedule.
That is true. It's just something about A&M, man.
No, I agree with you. I understand that, but I'm
even with the advantages,
sipping it.
Even with you're sipping too much of that Texas too. That oil might be getting to your head, but my goodness, I mean, Texas A&M. They're a weird paradox to me. They have all the money in the world. They have all the resources in the world. They have infinite whatever you want to throw at them. Support, loyalty. They gave Jimbo Fisher a trophy with national championship 20XX, for goodness sakes. They have everything you need to build a power, and they just can't do it. And, and it's not to blame A&M for trying. They are trying they're almost to playing Z at this point.
Oh, I don't know about not blaming A&M. I mean, once you see that new Untold that's coming out with Johnny Manziel, I'm pretty sure that wasn't all him just fostering that. There might be a problem at A&M of fostering a bit too much of hyping up their own guys, not enough discipline.
And that could be – it's Southwest Conference school.
Yeah.
I accept that is a thing that'll always kind of happen. Oh, yeah. That's how those schools have always been. But A&M is just – I don't have any faith in them. I don't believe them. I don't I will see it and I will believe it. But I don't see it, so I don't believe it.
I don't blame you for that. Again,
that's where I'm at. Again,
teacup sipping.
I know this is going to be one of our main agree to disagree on, but we will have to see, folks, is all I can say. Maybe I'm right. Maybe I'm wrong. Who knows? That's the joy of doing this stuff. Mississippi State's the next one up, the next Maroon team. And unfortunately, for Mississippi State, this is a situation where you have a new coach, not by choice, but unfortunately by circumstance, with the passing of Mike Leach, Zach Arnett taking over his first year with a 9-4 team. Mississippi State, though, they do have one of the best quarterbacks in the SEC, and Will Rogers, a guy that can absolutely sling the ball when he needs to, but under that Leach system, they used him more as kind of a medium guy. He didn't need to make, 20, 30, 40-yard downfield deep bombs on everybody. Just throw your little 5, 8, 10, 15 when you need to. That's going to change a little bit. You get a new offensive coordinator in. I wouldn't be surprised if you see Mississippi State take a few more shots here and there. But you look at the Bulldogs, and they're a team that they have the possibility to compete, not to win the West by any means, but to be, what they've kind of been the last few years, the thorn in someone's side. We've seen that how many times now from Mississippi State. But can they transition quickly, or do they have a bit of a rocky road? Now, the scheduling gods were not favorable, giving you LSU third game.
Right.
That's never a good time there. And then you go to South Carolina, then you get Alabama. That is one of the worst draws you could get being in the SEC West. I still think, however, once you get out of that, you get Western Michigan, you get a nice cool-off game, and you essentially get 2 byes. Not to discount Western Michigan, but you get 2 byes.
Right.
You're 3-3 more than likely, maybe 2-4 if you have absolutely everything horribly go wrong against Arizona. And then you get Arkansas, Auburn on the road, Kentucky and at A&M, Southern Miss. This can still be a team that makes a bowl game. I don't think it'll be, the end of the world. I could see 5-7. I could see something like that. Mississippi State, just with a new head coach and everything going on, they're a bit more down than I think they would have been.
Well, I think is what I'm expecting from this team is, you'll see a shift away from the air raid because I think smartly Coach Arnett kind of realizes it's going to be tough to run that without Mike Leach. That guy was and always will be a genius when it comes to just, offense of that caliber, that air raid. But I think, the guys that are there are going to play hard and memory of Coach Leach. And that emotion carries weight. I mean, when you're out there doing it, we've seen it with other teams where, you have a tragedy happen, whether that's a player or somebody that's close to the team. They could rally around that in a positive way to honor that person. So I do expect them, no matter what, always be fighting. Like I say, kind of had that thorn on the side. Don't know where their ceiling is, but they're going to be out there fighting. I think defensively they'll still be stout. They were solid last year. I think they'll repeat that this year. It's just, how's that offense look now? New offensive coordinator, new regime there. What will Rodgers be like as a quarterback? Like I said, how will they change his role a bit? That's what it's going to come down to. I think at the end of the day, if you could, like I said, pull out a bowl game, maybe go 7-5, that type of stretch, that's probably, considering how the offseason went and the unfortunate tragedy, if you could do that, I'd call that a win for Mississippi State.
Yeah, and that's where I'm at with it. This is one of those just, having to deal with all that change and none of that, you want to see happen. I mean, anytime you lose someone like Mike Leach, who's just influential to the game. I mean, just one of the, when you think of college football, you think of him. He's one of the guys who's absolutely there. And having someone who created this system that we almost see everywhere nowadays in little bits and pieces at least, I agree. You've got to be able to change away from that. Maybe we see, I don't know how we'll see that. Right. 100%, but I think, like you said, Tyler, if you can just get to a bowl game, that's a win for this season. And that'll move us on to South Carolina, and I hate to do a rapid mood shift on you, Tyler, but we have the Duke's Mayo Classic to talk about. South Carolina, North Carolina, week 1, someone's getting Mayo dumped on them, hopefully. Hopefully they do that. Fingers crossed, everybody. Maybe we'll see some Mayo again. South Carolina, Shane Beamer, year 3. South Carolina, they caught fire last year. They went 8-5. They were one of those teams that we looked around and saw, there's potential there. Spencer Rattler not playing great, and then comes out and absolutely obliterates Tennessee, and then the defense, special teams, and everything does their part against Clemson. And then you beat Notre Dame as well in a bowl game. I mean, you had just 3 quality, huge momentum, building wins going into the offseason, and everything's continued to trend up for the Gamecocks. South Carolina's just got to tweak that defense. You got to improve that. Can the offense stay consistent is the main thing, because we saw that a lot at times last year with South Carolina. Good one game, bad the next, sometimes down to good one quarter, bad one quarter even. But you look at the start, North Carolina, you get to go up against Drake May, one of the best quarterbacks in college football this year.
Yep.
You get Furman. Can't let Furman catch up on you. We saw this happen with the Citadel. Now, that was a completely different situation, but those in-state games will give you some battles here and now and then. Then you go to Georgia,
Oof.
which, I mean, is a brutal start.
Yeah.
But Mississippi State at Tennessee. That is a 5-game stretch that is ridiculous. I mean, you get two teams that are probably going to be in everyone's top 10 easily with Georgia and Tennessee. And then North Carolina, who could be anywhere, and I mean literally anywhere. Some people, maybe 15, maybe 20, maybe 25, anywhere in that range. If South Carolina, if you're just 3-2 getting through that first stretch, you take that as a win. You absolutely take that, I would think.
Yeah, I would say so. Because just those two games being on the road as they are of Georgia and Tennessee, that's going to be tough. But, I mean, you pulled off that win last year. And so in Tennessee, and who knows, right? If you're able to go into that game 3-1, maybe there's some motivation there to say, hey, we beat them last year. Let's repeat it, But yeah, I think, like I said, if you get to the bye week and you're 3-2, and you've at least the big issues for South Carolina, it's both on the ground, offensively, defensively. The running back position is not probably where Coach Beamer wants it to be going into the season. Not clear cut there. So Spencer Rattler, it's going to be on him to provide a spark there to hopefully help open up that run game. And then defensively, we talked about Auburn and Auburn A&M being just not physical enough defensively, and especially against the run last year. Same thing for South Carolina. They were one of the worst in the conference against the run. Can you improve that? Because if you do that, suddenly things, start to work a little bit better in your favor. And despite those issues, I mean, especially defensively last year, they still pulled off some big wins. And so Coach Beamer's got them going in the right direction, but now you're at that phase of, can you start turning the corner? Can you start finding that consistency? We talked about that with some of these teams, but that's where you're at with South Carolina. And I think really the biggest question is, can Spencer Rattler achieve the potential he was once theorized to be at? This was a former top recruit, supposed to be the next guy. We all saw how that went at Oklahoma. I just, and he's got a guy that's in his camp in Beamer, and that's big. I mean, we got a guy that trusts you and believes in you. That's a big confidence boost. But really it hinges on what Spencer Rattler could be now that he's kind of in that last hurrah, if you will.
Yeah, and you mentioned the run game not being where it needs to be at South Carolina. That means more of an Antoine Wells or maybe a Troy Knox or someone like that. I still believe in South Carolina to get this thing done, though. Shane Beamer, he's one of those guys, you believe in him. When you listen to him talk,
absolutely.
You listen to his vision, everything he has, he's one of those guys that, he'll go out there and do just about anything. I mean, I can't think of any other coach that would willingly get mayonnaise dumped on him, Tyler. Just for the good cause of having fun about it.
Of course.
It's just going back to that Mayo Classic game. I mean, that's going to be amazing to get the season started. That's one of those fun games to look forward to on kind of more of a blow week one. But post-bye, after that Tennessee game, you get the bye, and then it's Florida, at Missouri, at A&M, Jacksonville State, Vandy, Kentucky, Clemson. And I see that, that's a lot more favorable than Georgia and Tennessee are. You look at that, that's, counting it up 1, 2, we'll call it a, 50-50 there. 3, 4, 5, maybe another 50-50 with Clemson. That's a pretty good season for me, Tyler. I mean, 8 wins again doesn't seem amazing considering you just went 8-5 last year, but consistency, and that South Carolina is always going to have one of the toughest schedules when Georgia's good, Tennessee's good, and Clemson's good. Absolutely. You have 3 almost built-in perma-losses, it feels like, right. And you won 2 of those games last year.
Right. No,
it's just if you can keep it consistent.
Yeah, and that's how you start attracting recruits and things of that nature. Say, hey, guys, we're at the doorstep. That's where Coach Beamer's trying to get to with this group is, to send that message out to potential recruits and guys that are there and are going to return that, hey, we're at the doorstep. We're just that close. Again, when it comes to SEC margins, guys, it's just those margins from those teams that are below the Georgias and Bamas. Can you just make up that little bit of a gap to get over the top and be with those guys? And Georgia fought that for a while, right? We saw that with them trying to catch Bama. Hey, can we just make that little bit of extra push and get up there? And they finally did, but that's what all these other teams are trying to chase right now.
And that brings us to the bottom four. The reason I say that, you're probably wondering, Ole Miss, Kentucky, Florida, bottom four, what am I talking about? None of these teams got a first-place vote.
Right.
Everyone else did.
Including Vanderbilt.
Including Vanderbilt, who got 5, which, makes sense, I guess. We'll have to see that one as it goes along in the season. But Ole Miss, you want to talk about kind of a, low-key, tough schedule here. Georgia Tech at home, not the big deal. Mercer, no. Tulane, though.
Yeah.
On the road, keep in mind. Going to
Yeoman.
Yeah. Tulane's a fun team. I mean,
they're anytime get up for that game.
They better get up for that game. Yeah. You're talking about the defending Cotton Bowl and American Conference champions here. I mean, this is 4th year for Lane Kiffin, 8-5 last year. The QB battle, Tyler. We have a transfer off, if you will. Spencer Sanders transferring from Oklahoma State. Jackson Dart was at USC at one point in time. Someone who was not originally committed to Ole Miss is going to win this battle out. I have no earthly idea who it's going to be. They're going to have a lot of weapons to go to, whether it be Michael Trigg at tight end, whether it be, another transfer, and Zachary Franklin at wide receiver, and the most important prize of all those 3 that I just mentioned, and I'm about to mention, Quinshon Judkins at running back. I mean, you want to talk about a fun guy to watch.
Oh, yeah. And that's, Judkins was kind of the breakthrough star for them last season, in a season where it was supposed to be Zach Evans. Remember, going back to TCU and just how remarkable their season was, they lost him in the offseason. That was the guy that was a 5-star recruit that they were going to rely on this past season, and he left, went to Ole Miss, and the freshman came in and lit it up. And Kiffin smartly kind of leaned on him a bit. Jackson Dart's in a spot where there was times where he looked really good last season. There was times where it was like, I don't know if this is good enough to get done in the SEC. So you mentioned Sanders coming in. Don't forget about Walker Howard from LSU. I mean, those 2 guys at least have, I'm sure, a push start in the spring, and we'll do here in the fall as they get going soon. It'll be interesting to see who they go with. Sanders, obviously we saw plenty of them at Oklahoma State. Oklahoma State fans are trying to claim that they're happy he's gone. I think they'll regret that once we get to the season. But he's a guy that's got battle-tested experience, and he's productive. Is there some issues that he could still work on? Absolutely. He's not going to be a guy that when it comes to time for him to move on potentially to the NFL, he's not going to be a high-round pick. He's not going to be one of those guys. But as far as college quarterbacks go, you could find worse quarterbacks, and you can find a guy that and Sanders, he believes in himself. And I think last year kind of got the raw end of the deal, played through some injuries, tried to stick it out for Oklahoma State, and it just fell apart, right? And I kind of went with the rest of the team. So I think for a fresh start for him, he's got a chance, right? If he gets the win of the starting job there, it'll be interesting to see how that goes. I think they've got 3 solid quarterbacks, but which one will emerge? And at the very least, all 3 of those guys know they've got that man in the backfield. You mentioned Judkins. It's just going to be, if Coach Kiffin is worth his salt, I'm feeding the ball to that man right there.
We will have to see, though, Tyler. I mean, you mentioned the quarterback battle. I have no absolutely idea. I'm not even going to say that sentence correctly. That's how little of an idea I have. But just Ole Miss is just such a perplexing team to me because on paper, they look like they have several tools that they can get out there offensively and compete with anybody in the SEC. Defensively, however, is another problem. Because once you get that kind of shootout mentality or even just a little bit of a high-scoring game, that offense keeps flying, that defense is going to have to catch up at some point, and then you leave yourself wide open for something else. And, I mean, you talk about this schedule here, just brutal. I mean, at Tulane, which, keep in mind, we've both now mentioned, is not a slouch by any means.
No, that might be a situation where Tulane's favored.
It might be. Very well could be. And then Alabama on the road, LSU at home, which is nice to have that game at home. After you remember last year, Ole Miss was up in that one, and then LSU just turned on the Jets, and it was over just like that.
Yep.
Then you get Arkansas at home. Bye week, go to Auburn, Vandy, A&M, then you go to Georgia. So you get just about everybody thrown at you this year, with the exception of Tennessee, basically, of the Big Four. And then Louisiana Monroe, and then your classic Thanksgiving Egg Bowl How else would you want to spend Thanksgiving, Tyler?
Right.
If you're not watching the Egg Bowl, you're doing
What are you
Thanksgiving
doing?
wrong.
Yeah.
But Ole Miss this year, I mean, just trying to pin a number on them is hard. Trying to even pin a range on them is hard, it feels like. Because I could see them being another, 7-8 win team. I could see if everything goes absolutely south, all your quarterbacks are inconsistent, which we've seen before from Spencer Sanders. We've seen it a little bit from Jackson Dart at times.
Oh, yeah.
Things could go south, and this could turn even, down to a 6 and maybe even a worst-case scenario 5 or something like that. That's things are going really bad.
Yeah.
And, opposite end, defense is able to pitch it together. I could see, that 8 or 9 even, maybe a 10 if everything went absolutely crazy in their favor. So
Sure.
Ole Miss is just, I don't like having to say a range of, 5 to 10, but it's really where they are. And it makes sense that a Lane Kiffin team would be that one to have that.
I don't know if 10's the ceiling, but I do think – and here's the question I'll pose to you because this is what I'm kind of curious about. If they go 8-4, right?
Yeah.
And maybe you win the bowl game, maybe you don't. Let's just say 8-4 regular season. Is that kind of – Kiffin wouldn't be put on the hot seat at that point, right? You would think 8-4 with this schedule would be okay. That's where I'm kind of trying to figure out is, okay, is this a season where if they don't perform, is Kiffin on the hot seat at this point? I would say unless they go like you're talking about disaster scenario, if things go to 5-7 and they've regressed that much, he's probably on the hot seat, right?
Yeah.
But I'm trying to figure out what would be acceptable for this Ole Miss team because, it's, like I said, it's kind of a weird spot. They're a tough team to peg, and they were Jekyll and Hyde last year, and I think you might see more of the same.
Unfortunately for Ole Miss, I think that's kind of where they're heading. But to me, if I had to put myself in the mind of an Ole Miss fan, I would say, if I'm looking at this schedule, I would probably guess 9 wins. I would say one of that Tulane, Bama, LSU, Georgia you take.
Oh, wow.
I would say just in theory alone, one of those 4, Tulane probably being most likely. But we know.
I think they lose all 4.
You think they lose all 4? See, I think they lose all 4 too. But if I had to guess, if I was an Ole Miss fan, I'd probably think this is a 9-win season just because you want to keep on building on. You have all this other stuff going on. If they go 8-4, I wouldn't panic yet. You just got an unlucky draw to be playing one of the best group of 5 teams in Tulane. That's just how scheduling works sometimes.
Right.
But if you go to like 7 and then let's say you mess up a game against a Texas A&M or something like that, they're not going to be happy with that. Then you start getting into that weird borderline territory there that I have no earthly idea. Then everything can go off the rails or everything can stay on track. Like I said, I would have no idea when it comes to that situation then. It's just wacky. That's just how the lane train works, Tyler. It works in mysterious ways.
It's a ride, man.
It absolutely is. And that will bring us to Kentucky. Now, Kentucky, Mark Stoops, his 11th year at Kentucky. I mean, feels like he hasn't been there that long, but he's been building the program.
Yeah,
I mean,
he's got him in a good spot, right, where they're consistent.
He absolutely does. I mean, it's no longer the Will Levis show. And considering how some of the games went later on in the year, you might be glad it's not the Will Levis show. But Kentucky has a bit of an interesting problem on their hands. They need to find a way to run the ball effectively. That was something they struggled with last year. You had, Levis and Rodriguez as your 1-2 with quarterback and running back. And you had 9 rushing touchdowns on the entire season, which Rodriguez got 6 of those, and he was out half the year.
Right.
That's one of those problems that you got a new transfer quarterback, but it's Devin Leary, who is a pocket passer. He's not going to fix that running problem at all. You got to fix that by actually having, your offensive line, your running back, your everything working well. Leary's not going to scramble. That's not who he is. So Kentucky's got that problem on their hand on offense. Defensively, they're going to be solid. They're usually solid.
They have been under Mark Stoops.
That's how Mark Stoops is. But you look at their schedule. You look at the first 5 games. Ball State, Eastern Kentucky, Akron, at Vandy, and Florida. You can win those games, but if you don't have a run game, you may not beat Florida. You may not even beat Vandy if you play as bad as you did last year. Remember, you lost to Vandy last year. That's how bad things got.
Yeah.
Kentucky, I'm not going to say Mark Stoops is in trouble because I don't know at this point what would get him in trouble.
No, he just got 2 years ago. He got a
exactly,
contract extension.
Exactly.
So basically, he's got an automatic clause in his contract where every time I think he wins like 8 games, gets another year add on. They've got him locked up. He's got job security right now. He maybe has one of the best, if not the best, outside of Kirby Smart and Nick Saban. He might have the best job security in the SEC.
Yeah, it's one of those to me though. When you go 7-6 with Will Levis, who is by all means a good, not great, but good quarterback.
Hey, he was projected to be a first-round pick, won the second round, but projected to be a first.
Yeah, and he should have never been projected to be in the first round, in my opinion. But that's more ESPN doing their thing than me. But
okay.
I'm just saying, if you lose to Vandy, you should automatically have any first-round status revoked.
But they got 4 first-place votes. It was good.
Okay. But either way, this is one of those that Kentucky's just – this year I have no earthly – it's all going to come down to if they can fix that offense a little bit to me.
Guess what Kool-Aid I'm drinking, Cade?
Yeah, you're going on this again.
Oh, yeah, we're on the Kentucky Kool-Aid. So here, I'll give you the positives, right?
Okay, positives.
First of all, you're absolutely right. You got to have a run game. Their offense, not good last year. Should have been better. But here's the positives. That explosive offense we saw the few years before that 7-6 season.
Yeah.
The offense coordinator responsible for that, Liam Cohen, back. He's back.
Yeah.
Stoops got him back. Devin Leary, like I said, pocket guy. He's not going to help you in the run game, but he's throwing to an extremely talented receiving core. He's a good, smart pocket passer. You don't need him to throw for 400 yards a game.
Yeah.
And their line, that was a concern last year, part of the reason they didn't have a good running game, went to the portal hard, got some guys there that are going to be contributors. So offensively, you could see it come together. All you got to do is find that running back, maybe a couple that could help you out there. And then you combine that with the fact that we know that Kentucky is going to play good defense. That's something that has been really kind of their calling card over the stretch where they've, popped and kind of got themselves to that nice midpoint where maybe they can't recruit like the Alabama and Georgias of the world, obviously, with the resources they have there. It's basketball first school. We know that.
Yeah.
But Stoops is doing what he can with what he's got, and he's done a hell of a job doing it. So I can see things come together for Kentucky. I mean, you look at the schedule, yeah, you got some tough ones. You got at Georgia. You got the Tennessee game, but you get that at home. You got to play Bama at home. But outside of those 3 games, this could be a rebound year. I could see 9-3 on the schedule right here.
Sir, you look at that South Carolina game right there.
I'm sorry, Coach Beamer, but I don't know if you're beating Kentucky.
Yeah, listen. I'm just saying.
That's more because of you trust Spencer Sanders, or not Spencer Sanders. Excuse me.
No, I don't
Spencer
trust
Rattler.
I don't need to trust Spencer Rattler in one of those games. That's one of those I could think. That could be a special teams game. That could be an anything game. You get South Carolina and Kentucky together. Who knows what's going to happen? Who knows what's going to happen on SEC Network primetime, Tyler?
Give me Kentucky.
Okay, you're going to take Kentucky. I think Kentucky could be a 7-8 win team. I don't see them being 9. I think they always have one of those weird games that trips them up. But other than that, I still think they'll be a solid team. They're not going to be, horrible by any means, but they'll still be solid. That's what they've been doing.
9 wins, book it.
Okay. We'll come back to this. We need to do an end of the season wrap-up show where we just go back and watch this again and be like, these guys, what were these guys talking about?
More so we watch it in private, then we come back with, okay, here's where we hit, here's where we missed. Hits and misses.
Yeah, there we go. Well, that's going to be a new segment.
Hey, I'm down for it.
Okay, well, we'll talk about that then. This might be one that we have a lot of hits or misses on. It's Florida. Man. Billy Napier, second year, went 6-7 last year. You've got Trevor Etienne. You've got a strong running back there. You've got some great defense. But, Tyler, I cannot stress this enough, Tyler. Graham Mertz is your quarterback. Graham Mertz at Wisconsin, they had the 113th best passing offense in America. Some of that was more by design of Paul Christ's offense and running the ball, full steam ahead into an 8-man box. That's a different discussion for a different day. But I'm not sold on Graham Mertz. Anthony Richardson had the talent, and you knew he could play to his potential and win you games when he needed to. Graham Mertz does not have that. Graham Mertz has none of that. Graham Mertz might be able to, maybe win you a game against Charlotte or a McNeese or someone like that. Maybe a Vandy, maybe something along that line. I don't know how he's going to fare against, Utah right out of the gate in Salt Lake City on a Thursday night, or at Tennessee, or even at Kentucky, or, how he's going to fare against Georgia, of all people, or Florida State. I have no idea.
You ready for the hot take?
Yeah, sure.
And I feel bad for Billy Napier because I think he was doing a great job at Louisiana Lafayette.
Yep.
I felt like he had a shot to do something at Florida. And hopefully he gets a third year, kind of have more of his guys show through a little bit. But it would not surprise me if Florida finishes last in their division. Behind Missouri, behind Vanderbilt. You look at this team, they lost their standout offensive lineman, Osiris Torrance, to the NFL. You mentioned Anthony Richardson gone. Their defense was very leaky last year, especially against the ground game. Hadn't really improved. They only returned 4 starters there. And you got Graham Mertz at quarterback. That does not inspire confidence. I mean, you laid that out very well. And the schedule, you got LSU, you got Georgia. That's a split road at home. You're at Kentucky. You're at South Carolina. You got Tennessee. I mean, you got to play Utah straight away. It's rough. Got Florida State at the end of the season. This is not pretty. I mean, this is a team that, like I said, I feel bad for Billy Napier because I don't know if he'll get another crack at it after the season because we know Florida can be a little fickle in terms of maybe expecting too much at times, right? And I'm not inspired by this Florida team at all, Cade.
No. That's simply all I have to say is just no.
There's not much positives.
No, I look at this.
You mentioned the run game. They're going to have to lean on that.
Yeah.
They're going to have to.
Mm-hmm. And, I just look at this, and, Utah's a loss.
Yeah.
Tennessee's a loss. Kentucky's a loss. Georgia's a loss. LSU's a loss. Florida State, that's every ranked team on the schedule. You count those as losses, that's 6 right there.
And you can't guarantee the Arkansas game.
Yeah, you can't guarantee Arkansas. You can't guarantee at South Carolina.
And at Missouri.
And at Missouri, yeah. You really can't. You can guarantee McNeese, Charlotte. I wouldn't even guarantee Vandy. You lost to Vandy.
Right,
you got 2 guaranteed wins in your pocket.
Yeah.
If you're Billy Napier, and like you said, I do feel bad for him a bit because you're killing it at Louisiana. You come up here and everything is just,
it was a mess.
Welcome to Florida. Yeah. You need to win 10 games now. And
yeah.
I get that for Florida. I get that you started building that expectation in the late 2000s. You now expect to be one of the big boys. That's where Florida's been most of the 90s and 2000s. That's the expectation now. But I think at some point for Florida, you got to look back and just kind of reevaluate, okay, maybe the LSU model where, we'll have our peaks and valleys and kind of go through that. We might not always hit a home run, but we might hit a solid single or a double somewhere in there along the way. Eventually we'll get to home plate and everything will be all right. But who knows? Maybe they keep Billy Napier around. They see recruiting slowly getting better, starting to turn the tide there, and now it's starting to take off even more. Maybe they don't. Maybe they just fire him and move on to the next guy.
Well, and that's, if I'm the floor, and I know, like you said, because you described it perfectly, they want 10 wins every season. But if you got a coach that's at least doing well in their recruiting, give him a little bit of time. Give him that third year. And depending on – now, if they go through this year, they're not really improved, they maybe regress a bit. Then you go to year 3, it's still a dumpster fire. At that point, you got to move on.
Yeah.
Right? But, just with the schedule laid out, it's a tough schedule right here. This is, for any team, a tough schedule. So, minus those 2 easy wins like you talked about with McNeese and Charlotte, other than that, every team can give you a fight.
Absolutely. I could easily see them firing Napier, though. That's the thing. Yeah. I could see them going, 4-8 and just, pull the plug. It's over. Now, if you go,
at that point, it's been too soon, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So.
Like, if you go 2-10, if you lose to Charlotte or they just go ahead and pull the plug. This thing, it's a done season at that point anyway. But it's going to be rough for Florida. That's all I could say. Just, I'm sorry for those fans that you got to sit through this. But at the same time, that's kind of the unfortunateness of all this in the SEC. One team has their peak and another's going to hit their low. That's just how it is.
Sad times in the swamp.
There you go, Tyler.
That's the newspaper headline.
You got your thing. You got it in there. But moving on to Missouri. Mizzou, the last team here. You said we talked about Florida and Vandy, who were right around them here. Missouri, this is really weird because of how Vandy is. You would think Missouri's last place in the East. They're not. They're sixth. But you look at Missouri's schedule, you look at who Missouri has. They've got some good talent on defense. They've got a great receiver in Luther Burden. The only thing, though, is can Missouri finally put it all together? They've struggled in the run game as well. They need a quarterback to step up. Brady Cook was your quarterback. You have Jake Garcia, transfer from Miami. Maybe he comes in, you shake things up a little bit. You went 6-7 last year. You played Georgia to the greatest. That might as well have been the national title game. That's the biggest game Georgia got to fight with.
Yeah.
But you look at Missouri's schedule. South Dakota, Middle Tennessee. Those 2 wins. Middle Tennessee, not as much. We saw what they did in Miami last year. They can give you a fight when they need to. Kansas State, no. I don't think it's going to happen. It's fun to see them play each other.
Sure.
But I don't think it's going to happen. Memphis. I think it's an interesting.
Favor Missouri there.
Yeah,
honestly.
I just want to mention it's an interesting idea, the playing a game in St. Louis in the Dome.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, you're playing a team that's Battlehawks cover. So if you're an XFL fan, St. Louis Battlehawks cause law. They're blue and silver. Memphis kind of did that blue and silver look for a while. Don't know why Mizzou's playing the St. Louis Battlehawks, but we'll see what happens there. I think Missouri wins that game. 3-1 puts you Vandy. We'll see. Could be 4-1 with LSU coming to town. Could be 3-2 and everything's on fire. That's one of those weird games.
I think, honestly, and here's the weird part. I don't think 3-2 would be necessarily everything on fire. I know the rest of the schedule's tough. You're about to get in that with, LSU. You got to play at Kentucky. South Carolina home's not necessarily easy. You go to Georgia. You get Tennessee after that. Florida, Arkansas on the road. The back half of that schedule's tough. I mean, it's rough, But they pulled off some of those wins last year with some dysfunction. They brought in a new offensive coordinator. We'll see how that goes. You mentioned Cook. Jay Garcia out of Miami, got him as a transfer. One of those 2 guys will start. They got to be better there. I think the biggest thing for them is the offensive line play has got to be better. They have not had an SEC caliber offensive line in quite a while in Missouri, and that's been a big issue.
To me, it's one of those 3-on-2 is on fire to me, not because of the record, but because of who that implies you lose to. That's K-State and someone else you should beat. 2 and 3 would absolutely, 2 and 3 would probably imply Memphis and Vandy and K-State, and that's really bad. Yeah. But I think it's a 3-2 who you lose to. If you're 3-2 and you lose to Memphis, you can maybe try to chalk that up. Well, Memphis might just be a really good group of 5 this year. Who knows?
Well, I would argue losing to Vandy would be okay. When you're on the road there, Vandy got 4 first-place votes, Cade. They're on the rise.
Here's the thing, though. Here's the thing, Tyler. I agree that they're on the rise, but it's about like Texas, Kansas 2021. We look back at that. We go, okay, Kansas, that was literally like the turning point for Kansas. No one cares because it was Kansas. You lost to – that's the same connotation Vandy has. It doesn't matter if they could lose to Vandy and Vandy could be 7-0. Everyone would go, who cares? You lost to Vandy. No one loses to Vandy. That's just how they are. When you have that reputation for so long and get beat down and become, the academics/baseball school, you don't lose to Vandy. If you lose to Vandy, which I agree wouldn't be the end of the world, some fans are going to treat it like that, and sometimes that vocal minority gets their way.
Yeah, but you're looking at a program, too, that I would say other than Vanderbilt in the conference, there's probably the least pressure on the Missouri coaching staff, right?
Probably.
I mean, they just have not been across the board in sports. It's been a decade since they've really seemed to care.
Yeah.
So I would argue that as a program, you're not facing the high expectation. You're not in Billy Napier's shoes where you got to start winning.
Yeah.
You can afford to have that moment against Vanderbilt where you lose and you're 3-2. As long as you can finish, with some solid stuff down the stretch, which, again, will be tough. I don't think Missouri's in that much of a hair-on-fire spot. The only problem is if you do lose to Vandy at that point, this is where you're probably saying everything's on fire because I don't know how many more wins are there after that, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know if you get back to 6-7.
And that's where I'm coming from this. If you lose to Vandy, I think it's partially you just lost to Vandy, partially who are we going to beat?
Right.
If we lose to Vandy, LSU, no. Kentucky, no. South Carolina, no. Georgia, no. Tennessee, no. Florida, maybe.
I would argue South Carolina and Florida, they're at home.
they have a chance.
You got a chance there, absolutely. So, you know, to that point, that's your 2 wins to get you to. If you start 4-1, that's your 2 wins to get you to the bowl eligibility. But, you know, it's going to peter right there. I don't see a high ceiling from Missouri. I think we're both kind of probably in the same spot here where, at best, you're probably 6-6. Maybe, just maybe by hope and a prayer somewhere and some injuries, you're 7-5, but that's probably it.
Yeah, I'm thinking more that 5-6 is probably right, where they'll be borderline to see or not. But, folks, once again, thank you for tuning in here. I mean, I can't believe it's another hour and a half gone by, Tyler. We're recording these all in a row, so.
Don't give away the secret.
I'm giving away the secret. It's 1 a.m, Tyler.
It's what we do here.
It is what we do here. We're here in the bunker, but it's not a bunker. We're just calling it that for now. But, folks, as always, thank you for tuning in. Feel free to like the video, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment down below. Tell us, do you agree? Do you disagree? Is Vandy going 7-0? Who knows?
Are we idiots? Do you have all the answers? Let us know in the comments.
That's true, yeah. Are we actually just incompetent and have no idea what we're talking about because it's the SEC? Who knows? Leave a comment down below. Always love to hear from you, folks. But until next time, have a good one, everybody.